Hi, I'm Bryn Brown, President and co-founder of Frontier Justice. 3 years ago, Mike and I founded Frontier Justice on the premise of faith, family, and freedom. Those aren't just words to us, but those are our actual values. Freedom for us is encompassed in the firearm and everything it represents in the men and women who serve our country. We've paired with Patriot Features to create videos of veterans in gratitude of their service. So on behalf of our entire staff, we would like to say, thank you for your service.
I never really got close to a lot of guys because you didn't know if they were going to make it or not. They rotated people in and out so frequently, and I just never really wanted to make a lot of friends in the Army. I actually came eligible for the draft in November of '68, and I got my draft notice, and you had to go up to Chicago for a physical, and went up there, and then I received my letter with the instructions, the date and time I had to show up at the recruiting center. In March of 1969, went into the Army. Reported up to Chicago, and first time I was ever on an airplane, within 12 hours, you're down on your basic, where you're going to serve your basic training at. And that was it. I mean, you're in. For basic training, I went down to Fort Polk, Louisiana for 6 weeks of basic infantry training. And from there, I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for advanced infantry training, which was in artillery. And we got our orders to go to Vietnam. I was held over another 2 weeks for self-propelled training. That's how I ended up in the 11th Armored Cav, their self-propelled unit. August of '69, I went to Vietnam. Oh, it's scary, but I mean, you take it one day at a time.
We're losing 200 a day, maybe more. And these punks here against the United States Army, United States government.
Yes, you were aware of it. And some of the guys would get upset over that. But I guess most of the guys blew it off. We had our tour of duty to do, and all we wanted to get it done and get back home. So they needed a cook, and asked for volunteers for a cook. Well, I figured you were in the rear supply all the time. Well, that was not the case. You flew out one day with resupply, spent the night with the guys in the front line, and then the next day when the resupply chopper come in, you'd get on that and fly back. And so you're doing that every other day. One day I got off the chopper and my replacement got on and they shot down the chopper. And I volunteered and stayed out in the field. Each howitzer battery has a forward observer that goes out with the line troops, a lieutenant, then you have drivers and 2 gunners, and they call in the artillery. And so we had an APC and tanks with us. APCs are cast aluminum vehicles, tracked vehicles. You had a 50 caliber machine gun mounted on them and 2 M60s mounted on them. We did not ride inside those vehicles. RPGs would go right through them. The heat core, the RPG explodes on the side of the vehicle, and the heat core goes through and just makes shrapnel out of anything that's in there. And that's what does the damage. So nobody really rode inside of them. And the driver was actually in the vehicle. So being a driver wasn't the best, but I drove the whole time over there. And the big thing when you're going down a column, you drove in the same track the front vehicle was in, so you don't hit it. You're less susceptible to hitting a landmine. But I did hit a mine once. We were moving out to go on patrol, and I was the third track back, and we went through this narrow pass, and the mine went off. And it was an older mine that was deeper in the ground. It just destroyed the track, and the only thing I got out of was a cut under my chin and concussion. And I was back out in 2 days, back out in the field.
Roger. That's 5998. That's 59.
Well, it was that night we were at our NDP, and we got a ground attack, and they were shooting mortars in, and I got bits of shrapnel in my side. Was medevaced out, and the doctor didn't take the shrapnel out. He says it's too small a pieces, it's just under your skin, it'll work its way out. And then you were back in the field the next day. The week before, we came up on enemy cache of weapons, and it was a bunker complex that we had taken some, and that's how we had all that ammunition, and that's when it happened. We were loading it up to destroy it, and one of the rounds went off, 51 caliber round went off in my hands. It tore the one finger off, and I could see every bone in my hand. And you sort of go into shock, but I was awake, and matter of fact, there's one of the same medevac units that had picked me up before, and the one gunner says, well, you're going home. And they took me into an aid station, and at that time they cleaned my hand, bandaged it up, and as soon as I was ambulatory again, they sent me to Japan, and they operated my hand, and that was about a little over a week I was in before I went to Japan. That happened in January of '70, and I started over there in August. You think you'd feel relieved, but I don't think I felt relieved. You don't want to get injured just to go home. February 12th is when I landed back in the mainland. I was flown to the Great Lakes Naval Hospital in Chicago, Illinois, where I served the rest of my time. They sent me up there basically for rehab on my hand, and you finish the rest of your tour duty there, and they discharged me to home. And all I wanted to do is get out. I was living at home, but you're still in the military, and what they offered me was a medical discharge and 30% disability. So I accepted it, and from then on I was a civilian again. I didn't care for the way we got out of there by pulling out, for all the lives that were lost and people that were injured. If you talk to the guys over there, when you're over in Vietnam, 99% of them would have gone and just marched up and taken the country. And we could have. But It didn't happen that way. I think serving your country, it's your duty. It was a eye-opener. You respect life over here much more than before. Phyllis and I guess, have been together for 20 years almost, and between us, I've got 2 sons. She's got a son and a daughter. We have got 8 grandchildren between the 2 of us. As far as receiving the Purple Hearts, I've got orders for one of them and never actually received the Purple Heart. Never really bothered me. But my wife started digging into my old photos and paperwork, and there was a golf tournament that's put on that sponsors heroes. And there was a state trooper, a missionary, and they picked me. And so they got a hold of the Army, and a colonel come down and presented me with 2 Purple Hearts. It was kind of emotional, but kind of a shock. After that many years, you sort of let it go. They don't appreciate them. I mean, and I know it was quite a while ago. They weren't appreciated when they got back from Vietnam, but the people should appreciate anybody that's in the service. I have got Purple Heart plates on my car. People have left notes on my car. Thanking you for your military service. I don't regret going there. I'm glad I got there and made it back.